Hello and welcome to Books Up Close, the podcast. I'm Chris Lloyd, a writer and academic, and on this show I talk to other writers about their work and their practice. This is a show for book nerds, aspiring and established authors, or anyone interested in how texts get made. In today's episode, I talk to Marni Appleton about the short story Shut Your Mouth, which is the opening story in her new book, I Hope You're Happy. Marni is a writer living in London. She holds a PhD in creative and critical writing from the University of East Anglia. Her fiction has been published in literary journals such as The London Magazine, Banshee and The Tangerine. I Hope You're Happy is Marni's first book and was published by the Indigo Press in February 2025. Well, Marni, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited about this book. I Hope You're Happy, and I've got it here right next to me. I've got so many questions about that. We can talk about your writing later on, though every time I say this title, all I can think of is Defying Gravity. You know, the bit like
I know, it's the time it came out, it was so hilarious. Now everyone just sings it at me, which is great.
Okay,
Yeah.
So it's not just me then. I was like, I don't imagine that was in your brain, but like now that's all I can think of.
It wasn't, because I hadn't watched Wicked or thought about Wicked for years, and then
That's really funny. Before we look at the passage from the opening short story, I wonder if you wanted to say a little bit about your thoughts on close reading. Like, I know you've done a PhD in creative writing, but how do you feel about close reading as a practice, an activity, and how do you feel about doing it with your own work here? Maybe you're used to that actually in workshops.
Yeah, well, I love close reading. I think it's such a kind of collaborative and also creative process between writer and reader. So as a reader, I really love going through and I feel like you can expand the work through your own reading, and it feels like a nice, collaborative process. And I think in particular short stories, they kind of demand that close reading. Like, you can't really read a short story once, I don't think, not to put people off reading my book, feeling they have to read it multiple times. But I think, especially with short stories, you get the most out of them if you read them really, really closely. So it's something that I am a big fan of doing with other people's work. And it's interesting because I was thinking about this question of close reading, and I was thinking, when I write, I feel like I'm almost doing like a process of close reading on my own work, like going through on that sort of forensic level. However, it's different because one of the good things about close reading is that you get like another perspective. So I feel like you almost in a way can't close read your own work, if that makes sense. Like, you kind of need to do it with someone else. Like, it's a project between writer and reader. So yeah, so I would say I'm interested in seeing how close reading my own work goes.
Yeah, close reading for editing versus close reading for reading are probably, maybe different kinds of activity.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think with editing, it's less generous. It's more from a place of what's wrong. Like, for me anyway, like, I'm like, how can I make this better? Whereas when I'm close reading other people's work, no part of me, I don't have my editing brain on. I'm not thinking, how can I make this better? I'm assuming that every single word is in its exact right place. And so I approach it in like a spirit of generosity. And I think that when I write for a reader who is going to read my work like that. Obviously not every reader will, but I write for the reader who wants to approach it with generosity and kind of try and pick out the meanings. So I think a lot of times when I'm writing, I put in the things that I'm like, maybe nobody will ever get this. But I'm sort of doing it for anyone who wants to kind of get that meaning. Like, I love kind of double meanings and playing around with that sort of thing. And I think even if only one person gets it, it's kind of worth it to have that little secret between writer and reader.
Close reading as generous feels really like a nice way in. So we're going to talk about the opening short story in I Hope You're Happy. I could have chosen any of them. I spent a long time like deliberating, and I was like, okay, in that case, just pick the opening of the first one, because it feels like you put that story at the beginning of the book for a reason, I guess. So I thought we'd do that. And the story is called Shut Your Mouth, which is a really good title, really strong title. I guess we don't need to know anything about it going in, right? Like, it is the opening of the short story, of the opening of the collection. So did you want to say anything about it, or do you want to just go straight to reading the passage?
Yeah, I think I'm happy to go straight to reading and then maybe we'll talk about it
Okay,
afterwards. Yeah.
great. Thank you so much.
Okay, so this is the opening of Shut Your Mouth. 3 minutes past midnight, Tuesday night. A hazy shape static against the darkness. Ponytail, puffer jacket, handbag. A girl like a blast of light. The CCTV footage slows as the girl leaves the fried chicken shop, a box of food clutched to her chest with one hand, phone in the other. She taps on the screen as she walks down the road and slips out of shot. A moment of lunar emptiness, a bright crackle, before the door swings open and she steps out into the street again. The clip loops on repeat. I scour the screen, looking for something, a tiny detail, an overlooked speck of evidence, eyes glinting from the bushes. There must be something we are not seeing. I return to the search page and click onto a message board for amateur sleuths. It is full of non professionals who are, like me, trying to cobble together pieces of evidence to create a fuller picture. I learned that her last text was sent at 11 minutes past midnight. GPS records show that at this point she was on her usual route home, approximately 5 minutes' walk from her flat. 2 minutes later, her phone was turned off or destroyed. It has not yet been switched back on. At the bottom of the page, the comments. She can't have just disappeared. She can't have vanished into thin air. Kirsten sweeps into my room without knocking. I snap the laptop shut. Daylight seeps from the sky, the colour of dirty dishwater. She switches on the main light, a bare bulb. It makes my eyes ache.
Really interesting opening. And with all of these episodes in my close readings, I've been picking the passage and then doing my annotations like 10 minutes before the episode just to like have it in my head. And also, what do I see new today that I didn't see the first time? And while this was in the back of my mind as I was reading the stories, like this morning, it came to the foreground that you're really interested in genre, I think, or the stories are interested in genre and expectation, right? So, like the opening of this, 0003, right? Like it doesn't say 3 minutes past midnight. It's got that time stampy thing. Tuesday night, a hazy shape. And you're like, okay, we're in this world of maybe like a crime novel, or like, a crime thriller. Who is giving us this information we don't know? It's in italics, right? Like classic of the genre that the opening passage will always be in italics. Like, is this in the past? When are we? Ponytail, puffer jacket, handbag. You've got like the details. And then you mess with us. You say a girl, comma, like a blast of light. That is not what you get from like a police report or a detective. So I feel like within the first lines, you're already like, here's a convention, a genre convention, and now I'm just going to throw out the window. Like, did you not intend that, but like, was that something you were interested in?
It's interesting that you pointed that out. So I'm definitely interested in expectation. Like that was a kind of thematic thing that I was interested in thinking about how expectation versus reality was like a huge thing that I was thinking about while I was writing this collection. And funnily enough, genre wasn't like it wasn't like a conscious thing, but now looking back at it, I'm aware how much like what a big role genre was actually playing. I think when I was writing this, I was thinking a lot about I was thinking a lot about real life crime, I suppose, which is why the that how that's kind of crept in. And I was definitely thinking about how we view people in like a detached sort of way, and that's where that kind of really like clinical report style description came in and helped with that. But also, while I was trying to show that that's how we think about people, I obviously wanted to be like, that's not how people are, and add a bit more kind of humanity and creativity to it. So yeah.
Right. And just that idea of like a girl, like a blast of light, right? That also tells us something about gender in this book too, right? So many of the stories are interested about how women are treated or how they identify or how they imagine themselves or imagine each other, like in all of the stories in this book. And I think that's really like a fascinating part of the collection. But the idea of this girl as a blast of light, as something almost brighter than herself, maybe all of these stories can't ever quite capture, right? There's something about girlhood or womanhood. Like I know you've got a quote from Melissa Phoebus at the beginning, and I was like, ah, and I freaked when I read that. So like it seems like that's something you're interested in, and how yeah, like what ways can we describe girls and women, and like whether the story can actually fully capture that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I think also the like mythos of girlhood as a thing sometimes overshadows actual girls. And even though it can be really useful to think of girlhood as like a collective experience, often that can be quite damaging. Um, so I was thinking about that a lot, I suppose, especially in terms of light. Like I wrote an academic paper about like light and like women as well. So I was thinking about these things in a kind of like academic sense in other people's work, and then those ideas kind of seeped into like in a subconscious way into my own work. But yeah, and I was thinking as well about how I think with the idea of like the girl like a blast of light, like how when like hyper focused attention can actually make you like blind to something, and that's with girls like in general, but also with this specific girl, it's like this hyper focused attention on what has happened here with this crime and that sort of thing. And actually when people get fixated on that sort of thing, whether it's a crime or a trend or whatever, you actually kind of lose sight of what it is that you're looking at.
Mm. And then, well, then the next line is the CCTV footage slows as the girl. So, like, that we're beginning with like looking, right? Like the gaze surveillance runs throughout these stories, right? People looking at each other, watching each other for good or less good, I suppose. But also like the girl, right? Like at this point, she still doesn't have a name in the story. And I think that's quite an interesting, like, that is so like crime or true crime centric, right? You can imagine someone narrating this on a podcast. The CCTV footage slows as the girl. Like it feels very much that world. And then, you get the really lovely details of the fried chicken shop, the box of food, the phone in her hand, which definitely puts us in a very particular time and place, I think. And a very particular milieu as well, right? I don't want to call these stories millennial stories, but they kind of are.
They are. I think the Guardian has called them that now, so it's fine. Yeah.
If the Guardian said it, then we'll go with it. Sadly, it didn't come out before my book on millennial fiction is out, so
I
we
know.
should have included you, but maybe volume two. And then you get this beautiful line where it's like she taps on the screen as she walks down the road and slips out of shot. You've got this really lovely like tripling there, but without the commas that I thought was quite nice. Like there's a real rhythm to that sentence that echoes like her moving. And then in this parenthesis with like M dashes, we can talk about those if you want. Or N dashes, sorry, not M dashes. You then say a moment of lunar emptiness, a bright crackle. So again, we've returned to that kind of like blast of light, but a real shift in the kind of language. Lunar emptiness, a bright crackle, like so unlike she taps on the screen and she walks down the road and slips like all these monosyllables. And then before the door swings open, she steps out into the street again. So again, there's like this tension that's operating at the level of the sentence between like one way of looking and another way of looking. And there's always like this back and forth between them that I think is quite fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's kind of it's the detached voice, and then the more kind of like I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's like the kind of poetic voice, the writer voice or whatever, trying to keep it interesting, but also yeah, the tension I think for me was the sense between like a person as an object, like a thing to be looked at, and a person as a kind of human, a full human with all that entails. But this character, actually, the girl who is in this opening, she never gets a name, and we never find out what happened to her, which is, I guess, a kind of interesting way to start a collection of short stories that's trying to flesh out these sorts of things. But I think with her being this object of attention, it felt important to almost like not conclude that story. Like, because I think sometimes when people are objects of like hyperfixated attention, no one cares after the moment. The moment is all that they really care about, and then when it's gone, it's gone. And I felt like in a kind of narrative you want to like wrap that up, but I really wanted to resist that, to be like, well, no, because the characters, like the main character of the story, has forgotten about her. She's moved, she kind of, she's obsessed with her for a bit, and then it goes, and that obsession gets replaced by something else, which is very kind of, social media. Yeah, so it felt true to kind of represent that, the way that, yeah, I guess like trends and interests like shift and replace each other, and actually in that, like, humanity gets lost a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, the the open ending. There's quite a few stories with open endings in this book. There's a lack of resolution throughout, which I think you must enjoy writing at some level.
I know. I love writing open-ended things and like ambiguous things. I think with writing a collection of short stories as part of a PhD means that I had a lot of input from my supervisor throughout the whole process, which is obviously an amazing way to be able to write something, to have kind of like mentorship on the way through it. But because I was so interested in this idea of being stuck in like cycles and things actually not moving, like there being the sense of forward momentum but actually not moving forward, I was really like writing all of these stories where like almost like nothing happened, which is not what I think these final stories are like. I was almost like deliberately trying to make nothing happen, like no, there being no momentum, like forward, not momentum, but no forward kind of progress from the beginning to the end. And then we had to kind of we had lots of conversations about like whether that was possible, in terms of like that's kind of being inherent in what you expect, in like what you expect from a story and what draws people to stories and that sort of thing. So that was interesting. And then I think it was more because I think with short stories there's this kind of like trope that there's like a epiphany at the ending, or like a kind of like a moment, which I really strongly wanted to avoid. Like I almost wanted to do like an anti-epiphany because of the ideas I was exploring. So yeah, there was a lot of back and forth about the endings and playing around with that sort of thing. But yeah, I because initially I wanted to end the collection with the story I Hope You're Happy, the title story, which is the only story that has like a vaguely optimistic ending. And then my editor was like, that's not true to the collection that you've written at all, to end it on this kind of like upbeat, forward looking note. And I was like, yeah, that's true. It's just, I think it's hard to shake off that. Like, I think the story structures, like the typical traditional story structures, are so ingrained in us because we absorb them everywhere, that it's really hard to, like, it's so tempting to end a story with like a resolution or with an answer or with something optimistic and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah. What you said about like repetition without that forward movement, that is like the millennial text in total, right? Like the idea
Right.
of you've been promised the good life, right? You've been promised the life plan, yet you're running on the spot and like wearing down. I think that's like formally you're doing that. And actually, after that long beautiful sentence we just described, the next sentence is the clip loops on repeat, right? Which might be even, that's the collection's description, right? Like this thing we're stuck on is just on repeat, whether it's like people in relationships or not, throughout the book. Really different kinds of relationships too, I should say, not just romantic ones but familial ones and friend ones, and yeah, how we get out of that. And then the next line, we suddenly get the I voice, right? Like we've been denied that for a few couple of lines. I scour the screen looking for something, a tiny detail, an overlooked speck of evidence, eyes glinting from the bushes. So suddenly we're like, oh, who is this I? We thought we were in third person, but actually we're not. We're in first person. Again, like a few of these moves where you're like, no, we're gonna do something different from what you thought or what you wanted. There's also loads of sibilance there as well that I think is quite striking, that stands out from the other sentences, right? We're suddenly in first person and then scour screen something, speck, evidence, like bushes, eyes. Like it really runs through this real softness. There must be something we're not seeing, again, like the S, as though like voice is suddenly now part of it, that actually the first person perspective is the one that we have to think about. That doesn't quite make sense, but I'm interested in how you've moved tonally, or yeah, narratively, I guess, in these couple of lines.
Yeah, I think with the, again, sort of thinking about the idea of like object to be viewed and then audience, I think often you don't think about the audience for other things, like especially because this collection as well is quite interested in social media and how that works. And I think when you view something on social media, even if you know it's really popular and loads of people have seen it, you don't think about them viewing it. You think about it's like a very one-on-one experience. It's like reading, isn't it? It's like you and the, no matter how many other people read it, it's you and the book. And it's the same with social media. It's like you and the whatever it is that you see. So it can feel sometimes like there's lots of other people, it's like, it's a trend that lots of people are getting involved in, but at the same time it's that kind of almost like direct relationship between what's on the screen, or like the person who's putting something on the screen and the person who's viewing it. So yeah, I wanted to play around with that a little bit, and I think I liked the idea of in the opening upending as many kind of expectations as I could, kind of like playing around. And I think this is one of the reasons why I liked it as the opening for the collection, that I wanted to invoke these things and then kind of play with them. And especially, I think the idea of scouring the screen and looking for evidence in the sense that the main character has these expectations of what's happened that she's projecting onto this CCTV footage. And the interest that she's showing in the case, I think, is clearly not like purely motivated by concern. Like it's also a bit of titillation or like just, there's almost like a thread of excitement going underneath it, which is like really counter to what really, if you actually break it down and step back, that you should be thinking when somebody goes missing. However, I was thinking a lot about, real life cases of people who have gone missing in the last couple of years, and there has been like sort of like a social media frenzy over it. And you think, is that really concern for, because it's always women, is it really concern for the women who've gone missing, or is are you almost like hoping that something bad's happened? Like when you're like looking for eyes from the bushes, it's like, why are we immediately jumping to these conclusions that something awful has happened? And is it partly like a kind of sick desire for something awful to have happened so that it's a good story?
I helped organize an event this week on true crime, actually, and that was like one of the things that came up. That was at the British Library, and it was it was interesting in American studies in particular, but like true crime is this American genre or form, and so much of it was about like what do we go to true crime for, or crime stories in general? Like what do we get out of them? What resolution do we get from something like a crime novel, right, which always ties things up, versus the true crime, which they were invested in particular ways. And yeah, like I scour the screen looking for something, a tiny detail. Like she's doing close reading, right? Like, but of the screen also. And yeah, you're right. Screens crop up throughout these stories. I think it's even in the second story, right? Like someone is looking at the partner's Instagram, like to see what she is saying about the person the narrator is interested in, right? So like, it's not that we go to any length to like find the detail that will prove something when we know actually the detail doesn't prove anything. And maybe part of your upending expectations is part of that too, right? Like, oh, you've got this detail, you think you've got a hand on it. Actually, no, I'm going to give you something else. Actually,
Yeah, for sure. That's so interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, but I guess, yeah, on social media, I think there is such a desire to read a lot into, especially people that we know in real life, but also people that we don't, like influencers and celebrities and that sort of thing. But to read into, to find something from that isn't there, like a tone or something that's going on behind the scenes. And yeah, so that's a kind of close reading that we do, but it does, I don't think it does, that doesn't necessarily lead anywhere except into an unhealthy spiral.
no, that it's in a book by Robert Eaglestone actually on like about reading, about what literature is and why we do it. And he's like, we all do it every day. You close read a text from your friend, you pay attention to the commas. Is there an exclamation mark? Is there an emoji? Why didn't they use capital letters? All of these things that we're so used to doing it, but when it comes to literary texts, we have a very different feeling about that. And when I've told people about this podcast that aren't like big readers or hated English at school, they're like, oh, because like the curtains are blue because the character's sad. I'm like, kind of, but that's not really like that's the hyper focus, right? But rather think about what language does, like what effects language has, not just saying her lips are red, therefore she's like a harlot, right? Like,
I think it's almost like close reading is like the opposite of that, isn't it? It's like the lips are red, that's got to be something really deep and meaningful. And then you think, but actually, sometimes the writer's just chosen red lips for some reason. But I think that's what I guess I mean with the kind of collaborative thing, that like you bring what you bring to the table, and that it isn't even necessarily what the writer meant to bring to the table, but that doesn't mean you're wrong. That means that it's kind of the text is living and moving in a whole different way, which is, as a writer, that's like the best thing you can hope for, I think.
yeah. I like that. And here, even though I should probably should say, like, we've got the first person voice, but we still might think it's a police person, right? Like, we still might be in that world. Like, we don't know for sure who we are, who we're listening to, who we're reading. But then I return to the search page and I click onto a message board for amateur sleuths. You're like, oh, does this person think they're an amateur sleuth? Like, is that what they are? And we realize that's not what they are. And I should say this story doesn't go the direction you think it's going to go, by the way. Right? Like, this sets up something that actually it goes in a whole other direction that I found quite bizarre in a great way, like a very unexpected way in terms of genre. But yeah, like here we're setting up.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because she kind of is an amateur sleuth, even though what she ends up sleuthing is not this murder case. She's sort of like she's sleuthing other things in the world, but she's a character who's very much kind of observing things, and she's not like actively trying not to get swept up in stuff because clearly she is from this opening, but she's sort of yeah, she's interested in the things that are happening around her, but yeah, she is getting caught up in them as well. So she's definitely an amateur sleuth, not a good one.
Yeah, exactly. I like the next like it is full of non-professionals. That's such a great way to describe yourself. Like, you're just very online, babe. Like, you're not like that's non-professional, I guess.
That's so true. But I do think that, well, there are actually, these are, unsurprisingly, I went on these websites for the story, and it's full of people who are, you know, I don't even know they don't say what they do or what their perspective is and this sort of thing, but they will be like, I have found this piece of footage, or I know that somebody drove past the spot of the crime at this time, and or I managed to find like a Instagram story of somebody who was near, like all these like really tiny things that I was like, it's interesting because to an extent, it's you think like as a non-professional myself, you're looking at it going, well, this is quite impressive. Like, is this useful? But then I think the truth is that like a real detective would be like, no, that's not like that's not what we're looking for. That's not like the whole it's like almost like you're looking in the wrong direction. Like the things you're looking for are not the things that matter, because the people on these boards are going in, they already know the ending, and the ending is that she's been like kidnapped and murdered, which is what they want, some kind of horror story like that. They're not actually looking at the full range of possibilities of what's happened.
Again, like that hyper detail you were talking about, right? Like, so fixated on the one thing that you're missing, like the wood for the trees, kind of.
Yeah. They're like interested in finding evidence to support what they've already decided is going to be the outcome, rather than looking at the actual, like going into it with an open mind.
Which is, again, a very terrible version of close reading, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's why, but that's why we have the death of the author, right? But it's like, if you go into a book being like, I know X about the author, so therefore the text is about X. He was like, well, that's the problem. Like, you're bringing too much of that world to the writing. Like, what does the language say? What is it? What is the text doing? And your ideas are getting in the way of what the text is doing. And yeah, that seems quite interesting how we're drawing that link between detection in this story and like figuring other people out, and then the act of writing and the act of reading as well at the same time. We're cobbling together pieces of evidence to create a fuller picture. Like, that's what we want, right? We want to do that with other people. Like, I want to know other people more, and so many of these stories show us frustrated attempts at that. Like, you think you know this other person, but you really don't. Even like, I hope you're happy, I think is really funny. On the back of the book is like, I hope you're happy is more a warning than a wish. Which is, I don't know if you wrote that line or whether publishers wrote that line, but there's something about like the extending something to the other and being like, oh, what you do with that is another, I don't know. Right? Like, I really hope you're happy, but I have no say over what you do with that line.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's why I kind of latched on to, because I actually wrote the line, I hope you're happy, in a story which is called Triangulation, where the character works icing cookies, and she gets an order of a cookie that just says, I hope you're happy on it. And she's like, that's so bizarre. And then I became really interested in that as a title for another story. And then it became the title for the whole collection. But what I think interested me about it is that when you read I Hope You're Happy, for me anyway, I don't read it as I actually hope you're happy. You read it as like a kind of yeah, like I guess it's like a sarcastic comment, isn't it? That's how I was like, is that me being really ungenerous? like thinking that that's how I read it. But then, in Wicked, that's how it is as well. It's like a sarcastic. It's not actually. I hope you're happy. However, inherent in that kind of sarcasm is a sense of like, well, you've made your choice. I hope you're happy with it because I'm out now, kind of thing. Like this is you're kind of on your own. But yeah, I was just super interested in different ways that it could be read, but also the idea that hoping someone else is happy is like a stupidly futile hope. Like you can't, striving for happiness is a really difficult and complicated thing to strive for. But especially like just opening that out to someone else, you just think, okay, what am I going to do with that? Like you hope it also it feels like an expectation as well. Like I think when I was thinking about like parents and children, and when you hope someone's happy, you almost like hope that they will express happiness because it makes you relieved of a certain responsibility. But like you just expect that, yeah, in them showing this positive feeling that you can just go, phew, I don't have to do anything now. Like my job's done.
The speaker of "I hope you're happy" is only thinking of themselves. They're not thinking about the other person at all. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like, I hope it's like, so for me, like, I will be happy if you're happy, which is a kind of relational statement, which, yeah, is not in any benefit to the person who's the happy one, really. So it's, yeah, I mean, maybe I'm overthinking it, but I was really like, I'm interested in like unpacking all the different ways that I thought about that statement, I hope you're happy. And yeah, my obsession with it kind of made me think it has to be the title. Like it's got so much in there.
There's no overthinking here. This is a close reading podcast. Like it's fine.
Yeah.
We go overboard. The passage then goes on. Again, we've got like, I learn that her last text was sent at 00:11. Right. Like again, like she's talking in this perceived voice, right, of like how she should be talking, right? Like that's how people talk about like when someone goes missing. GPS records show approximately 5 minutes walk from her flat. Like she's really trying to like ape the someone else's language. We can tell that it's not hers, right? It's not her way of speaking and thinking. Like you know that already. 2 minutes later, her phone was turned off, brackets, or destroyed. And that's a moment where you're like, no, maybe this is the narrator now, right? Like we're hearing her. The phone was turned off, which feels so passive, versus violence is right at the edge or the center of things, if you like. And the threat of violence runs throughout these stories, or like if not violence, threat, danger, the unknown. And that destroyed, I think, gives us a real insight into her mind there. It has not yet been switched back on. Again, like that wish, right? That someone's going to find it, or that the woman is alive, or something.
Yeah, definitely. I think the character, this character and lots of the characters in the collection are trying to be different people, like trying to figure out how to be, and in doing that they're borrowing from other people. So here you can see she's like absorbed the voice of this kind of investigative voice has come from the forum rather than necessarily. I think it's not even necessarily that it's come from like a police report. It's come from being like, okay, we're doing this, we're doing that, and it's almost like, so she's putting on something that somebody else is putting on, like they're affecting this police style, like report, and she is then putting on their voice to convey that. So it's almost like it's at even further of a remove from who she actually is. She's just putting on the trend that she's involved in. And then with the or destroyed, yeah, with that, I was definitely thinking about how interesting it is that she's almost not hoping that this woman has been killed, because I think there is fear there, but it's like it's the fine line between like fear and that she's sort of like, oh, what does this mean? This is oh gosh, if someone's, it becomes more of a story, I suppose, if something has happened, rather than if it's just like, oh, she just didn't call anyone, but she's fine. Like she was hoping for there to be like an exciting ending, and she was projecting that, and yeah, sort of hoping that there would be, yeah, I think and later in the story she's almost like hoping that she can uncover something herself. Like she goes to the chicken shop almost to think, could I find a piece of evidence, which is like so misguided. But I guess if you're part of this group, it kind of warps the way that you're thinking. You're in this group thing of maybe we can actually solve this. And so she, yeah.
And she is among the comments, right? At the bottom of the page, the comments. She can't have just disappeared. She can't have vanished into the net. I'm like, oh no, the comments. Like that is such like that is so of our moment, right? But the comments then come into real life when she goes to the chicken shop. Like there are other people there too, right? The guy behind the counter is like, oh, you as well, right? That it becomes like a tourist industry almost. That like people are so fascinated by this story. That seems more about them being there than wanting resolution for this woman, right? Or like wanting her to be okay, like as you were saying. But yeah, the comments like that really that really got me.
The comments, I know. It's like it's a fear thing now, isn't it? You're like, "Oh god, what did the comments say?" It's like it's never gonna be anything good in the comments, is it? It's never gonna be anything like, on rare occasions perhaps, but in general, you know that
Yeah.
whoever's commenting is adding something that you don't wanna hear.
Right, which, like a comment is, it's just like a throwaway line, right? But the comments has become like a proxy for the commons, right? Like that, like this is where people get to speak. But actually it's not, right? Like it's a very warped version of who is speaking. It's not everyone speaking. It is just like a particular slim area of people that have come to this thing to say something, right? But also like she can't have just disappeared. She can't, like that repetition, like this real desire for it not to be true, but at the same time, like again, like their desires, these people, the narrator's desires, like are irrelevant really to the storyline. Like that's not, you're not going to get it back from just these desires. And then the best bit of this like passage, new paragraph, Kirsten sweeps into my room without knocking. You're like a real kind of another jolt, right? I snap the laptop shut. Again, these like really like I snap the laptop shut, like the P's and the T's and the S are that crisp sound of like the thing, which I love. But also like who is this Kirsten? Like why is she coming to the room? Like more invasion, right? Like we're in like someone is invading someone else's space. Daylight seeps from the sky, the color of dirty dishwater. We could talk about pathetic fallacy if you want, but you know what I mean? Like that's there. And then she switches on the main light, a bare bulb, it makes my eyes ache, which is such a lovely callback to the blast of light, right at the beginning, the opening, or the bright crackle. That actually this bright bulb is not that, right? This bulb is shining too much light on things. The light as harsh rather than as full of energy or light or something.
Mm. Yeah, and I was thinking about like all the different kinds of lights. Like, so she's literally staring into light. If she's looking into a laptop, she's like staring into a light source, but it's the bulb that's too much because it's like that's the thing that's she's been seen essentially, which is like she was doing the seeing and she didn't want to be seen, which is why she's snapping the laptop shut and she's like, whoa, because she's been caught. Because Kirsten is like her friend who is also very interested in or in fact more so interested in trends, but she's very much like stop it with the missing woman. It's almost, yeah, that kind of thing of having this almost like wanting to keep it to herself from the people in the real world, but she's more than happy to share it with the people in the comments section, which I think is a very, yeah, like a very contemporary thing that people often, there's all these groups for various things like I don't know, like trying to conceive or like best way to clean or just all sorts of different things. So you can really like dive in to these questions with a pool of strangers and even almost like be more open than you would with people in your life and have these like obsessions or interests that you don't really like divulge or speak about in the kind of real world because they are stuck in your virtual world. So yeah, I was interested in that, the difference between almost like who the character is online and who she is with the her actual housemate.
That's a great place to end that actually. I was waiting for it. I was like, actually that's a really good line. Our online selves and our in person selves, like anyone that knows me, it's like that's one of my overriding obsessions and interests of the way that as millennials we've grown up through different kinds of online world and social media and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really interested in how that fractures or intensifies identity in certain kinds of ways. I want to talk to you about your writing though. Given that you did a PhD in creative writing, like how was that experience? Like did you have a set writing pattern? Do you have a different one now, like post PhD? Did you have writing amounts each day? Are you doing it on the computer by hand? Do you have rituals? All that. I want to know all the kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so I love writing by hand for like first ideas and that sort of thing. And then I usually write on the computer. And I am very much a person who tries to get a first draft of whatever it is down really quickly. So whether that's like, and this is for all of my writing. So if that's a like an academic article or a short story or a novel or whatever it is, I'm like, try and get it down as quickly as possible, and then you've got something to work with, and then it can change loads. But I find it much easier having like the words and like a structure to change rather than sort of having nothing, which was then really hard with the PhD, because obviously you can't just write a PhD really quickly. You have to like, that it does take a long time. And I sort of started my PhD, as I think many people do, going, well, I'm just going to write it. Like I'll get the first draft done in like a year or two or whatever. And then it's like, no, actually it takes a lot longer than that, because you have to figure out what you're writing about while you're doing it. Whereas with I think with the stories, I did do loads of like, I half write a story, or I'll like handwrite something and then it will change. So, but by the time I get to putting it on the computer, I will usually have like an idea of what it's about and where I want it to kind of start and finish. And then all of the like ideas and, the detail, the stuff that you close read, I write that once there's kind of big structures already there. Like those things come out in that kind of closer process. But yeah, I write write quickly and edit slow is definitely how I do it.
I like that. Write quickly, edit slow. Are you doing it like at desk? Are you doing it in cafes? Are you library person?
I'm like a firm believer that you can write anywhere, so I do it. I do it anywhere. The only thing that I struggle with is I find it hard to write in like smaller snatches of time. So I feel like, which I think is partly in my head, but if I sit down and I've only got like an hour, but I find it hard to be like, okay, I'll get into it, because it's then so frustrating when you get stopped, when you're like in the flow. So it's almost like, what's the point of summoning the flow if you're then just going to have to cut it out? So I find that hard. But yeah, if I've got a long stretch of time, I can write in a cafe, I can write in a library, I can write at home, I can sometimes write on a train, but weirdly, I always fall asleep on trains. So
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I mean, I would love to write academic work quite quickly. My word. I need to channel some of your energy, I think.
I think it's because with academic stuff, you write like the abstract or whatever first, don't you? So you almost like write yourself like a plan of what it's going to be. And I know that then when you get into it, it's not as easy as the kind of the abstract that you've kind of promised. But because I think once you've done the work of having that little like promise of what it's going to be, then I'm like, I just want to realize that promise. I kind of just like, yeah, let's get it down. And it does change loads, and then you have to do some research and that sort of thing. But at least I try and get like a plan down. So I've got some like ideas and words to work with, because I find the blank page is the thing that stresses me out the most. And I think with academic writing, I could just sit there and look at that for a long time.
Do you have early writing memories? Do you remember when you first were like, hey, I'm a writer, I can do that. That's the thing I want to do.
I do. I was thinking about this when I saw the questions, and I remembered that I think I was about 5 or 6, I wrote a retelling of The Three Little Pigs, and I was sent to the head teacher's office at primary school. And I remember being so confused because I thought I'd done something wrong. And it was only when I got there that they were like, this is excellent work for a year one or whatever it was. But I have this with my first kind of like, I have that weird mixed memory of being like, am I in trouble for writing? But I think it's interesting that I was so compelled by writing from such a young age. I think it's because I've always been such a big reader, and it was like the desire to do that, like something that I love, and like I loved reading, and then I was like, well, I want to do that. I want to tell those stories. So yeah, I've always written stuff, basically, I would say my whole life from when I could write. But various things, like when I was in my Avril Lavigne phase, I was songwriting. And I've definitely had a poetry phase, but I was not a good poet. But I think it's nice to have tried my hand at all these different things so young. So I feel like I've got a good sense of just writing in such like a wide scope of things.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I like the rewriting of Three Little Pigs. I'm imagining like a much darker version of that. Like, I feel like Marnie comes in and is like, actually, pigs are
I
gonna get
know.
their own back.
I think it's from like the point of view of the fox, the wolf or
Of
something.
course.
So I think it was as dark as a 6-year-old can do.
Look, you were doing Angela Carter before you even knew who she was. So, are there any useful essays or books on writing that have like been useful to you in your work? Like any things you've gone to that you thought this is really productive?
Yes. So probably my favorite. Oh no, I've just knocked over a pile of books, but A Swim in the Pond in the Rain is my yeah, I think that's my go-to writing book. I mean, I read it. I don't know if I necessarily read it to write, but it's the one that I found most like breathtaking and surprising, I suppose. Like when I read it, I was like, whoa, this is so, I guess because it's kind of like close reading, this book. It's like, well, it is close reading, like a very kind of close, but with an eye to thinking about how you craft your own stories. So yeah, I love this book. Other than that, I think I don't know that I have anything in particular that I return to craft. What I mainly do, honestly, is pick up books that I love and read them, and that's how I try and figure out how to do things. Like if I'm like, how do I get from this point to this point? I will pick up a book and be like, how does this person do it? And then use that as my way to figure it out.
Yeah, I like that. Well, given that we're there, that's my last question always. Like, what are your book recommendations? They can be old things, new things, stuff not yet out. Like, what should listeners go read?
Well, I brought a pile of books with me because every time people ask me this question, I go, I can't even remember any books that I've read. You know, my mind just goes blank and I'm like, I can't remember. But I've got The Office of Historical Corrections by Danielle Evans, who's just like an incredible short story writer. Daddy by Emma Cline, which I think Emma Cline is probably my favorite short story writer. Like I love her writing. I also brought Girlhood by Melissa Phoebos because this just such an incredible book. Like I love it so much, and she's just such a great writer. Like I wish I could
Yeah.
write non-fiction like
Oh,
that, but
don't we
I
all?
know. And I brought The Hours, which is like one of my all-time favorite books.
By Michael
So
Cunningham. Really
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah, really beautiful, and a book that I think I've returned to quite a lot to look at how it's done, just on a kind of sentence level. So yeah, those are my top recommendations.
Those are great recommendations, and I will obviously link them on the Substack so people can go and buy them and read them. Marni, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your time today. It's been a joy.
Oh, thank you. It's been so much fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Please subscribe if you haven't already, leave a review and share with people you know. You can also follow the show and me on Instagram at Books Up Close and on YouTube. And if you can, please do fill out the feedback form linked in the show notes. It's really helpful to us. You can get show transcripts and more information by subscribing to the Substack. This show is made possible by an Impact Accelerator Award from the University of Hertfordshire and the Arts and Humanities Research Council.